Welcome back, listeners, to the Mindful Living, which is a space where we slow down, ask harder questions, and explore what it really means to heal. Now, listeners, I'm your host, Sana, as always, and today's conversation is about something many of us we carry it quietly. Emotional wounds that did not come from one moment, but rather from repeated experiences. The kind that shape how we see ourselves, how safe we feel, how we move through relationships. My guest knows today that this terrain deeply, very well, not just professionally, but personally. From early childhood, he endured severe abuse. Beatings, humiliation, and fear became daily part of his daily life. And yet, instead of closing off from the world, something else happened. A deep empathy began to form, a sensitivity to suffering in others, a pull toward understanding pain rather than running from it. And that journey, listeners, led him to study psychology, earn a PhD in counseling, train future therapists, and eventually develop a therapeutic approach called source completion therapy, or SCT, which is a three-phase process designed to heal emotional wounds at their source, not just manage symptoms. We'll definitely explore that in the later part of the conversation, listeners. But let me tell you, my guest is also the author of Give Back the Pain, a book rooted in real stories and lived experience. So, today on The Mindful Living, we are not here to sell certainty or quick fixes. We are here to explore, to question, and to understand what healing might actually look like when trauma runs deep. So, listeners, meet my lovely, incredible guest, Robert Bleck. Robert, welcome to the Mindful Living, and I'm really, really honored to have you here with us.
Thank you so much. My pleasure to be with you.
So, Robert, to begin with, this is such a sensitive topic, and I mean, as you describe emotional wounds as something that can actually be completed, not just coped with or managed. But this is a strong claim, like especially in a world where many people are told that they have to, not they will, but they have to always carry their trauma in some form, whether you channelize it or you use it as a motivator, or whatever kind of feeling, but you have to have always carry that trauma. So, Robert, what do you mean when you say an emotional wound can be healed permanently?
Okay, so that's a really good question. Let me start with my experience, if that's okay with you. My abuse.
Sure, sure,
Okay,
sure.
my life started out very difficult and very painful. My mother, who was filled with anxiety and anger and rage, she took a great deal of that fury out on me. So, on what seemed like a daily basis, starting when I was about 3, she would beat me, degrade me, and humiliate me just about every day. Now, her beatings, sometimes they were with a closed fist, sometimes they were with an open hand, sometimes they were with an object, whatever she could grab, a shoe. She loved hitting me with this big cooking wooden spoon, or she would hit me with a belt because the buckle hurt more. So when she would hit me, it was very, very terrifying. I thought she was going to kill me. So, she got really creative with her, abuse. One time it was in the middle of the night, I was having nightmares, which I had because of her. Um, I went into the room for some comfort, her bedroom.
Mhm.
She dragged me back to my bed, and she tied me to the bed. The ropes went around the bed, over my chest, and again, I thought I was going to die. So I needed to figure out a way to survive.
Mhm.
So, starting at about the age of 9, I began to develop a really deep compassion and a deep empathy for those who were suffering in some way, whether it was a child I saw um, being bullied, where there was some injustice I read about or saw on TV, or there's someone who was grieving in some way or sick in some way. I felt deeply that I wanted to somehow ease suffering when I grew. But again, I was only 9 years old, but the foundation of what I wanted to do in my life began to materialize.
Mm.
So I had to figure out a way to cope with the staying there because I depended upon my mother and father for a roof over my head and for sustenance and for clothes. So I had to stay there. So what I did, I found sports. I became an athlete, and I found camaraderie with the teammates, and I found something I was good at, and it gave me some confidence. I also found nature. Nature, I loved getting up in the morning. I would get up really early for the sunrise, and I would watch that, and I would listen to the birds sing, and I thought they were singing to me. So that helped me, ground me a little bit. It didn't take away all the pain inside of me, so I knew I had more work to do, on emotionally. I was angry. I was fearful of the dark. I slept with the lights on for until I was a teenager, and I bit my nails. So I knew I had more work to do. So she kept beating me though each day, and about the age of 14, she started to come at me with her fists, and put my palm out and up, and I said, "No, you can't do this anymore. You can't beat me. I'm stronger now. I've been playing sports, and I will defend myself." So she looked in my eyes, and, I looked right back at her, and she was stunned, and then she turned around, walked away, and at 14, that was the last time she beat me. So I had to move forward in life, and I wanted to move forward, and I wanted to, become something in my life where I could make a difference with people's lives. So I worked hard in school to go to college. I majored in psychology. And, I had a track that I could go to either psychology or medicine. Now,
Okay.
I took both tracks, but I majored in psychology, and, that fit better for me. So I went on to, achieve a PhD and in counseling, and after I graduated, I worked in schools, I work in
Mhm.
clinics, I was hired as a university to develop their child counseling program, where I taught people, students in getting master's degree and beyond, how to be therapists and how to be counselors. What was happening at the time, I developed a little private practice, also small practice, and what was happening as I worked at the university, people kept calling me, getting in touch with me. They asked me if I would see them in their practice, in my practice, because they were abused as a child. So I said, I mean, I was familiar with what they were feeling because any child who's abused, what happens is the very unpleasant feelings are created. Feelings of worthlessness, feelings of emptiness, feelings of not being good enough, feeling not important, insignificant, betrayed, angry, empty. All of those feelings are just a few, but they are developed with everybody I work with, no matter what their their abuse was. Those are the core feelings that lie within a person. Now, what happens with a child? It's not possible for a child to process those feelings. Their little brains, they can't absorb that betrayal. So what they have to do, they repress it and they suppress it and they stuff it down is what I like to say. Now that's a survival mechanism. It gets us by as children because it's the only one we have. Again, like I said, I was dependent upon my parents. So what happens is though, this is where the where it gets tricky. That those feelings when they were young to be repressed helped, but as you get older, it turns into an emotional toxic brew. All those feelings that a person represses. And that's where the trouble starts because what happens is our subconscious wants to push this out, all those feelings. It's like eating a bad meal, getting food poisoning. Your body wants to push all those poisons out of your body, and it comes out in physically just about every orifice. It's the same as psychic feelings that are stored. Your subconscious wants to push that out. But we still don't want to feel as adults. So what happens is it comes out in dysfunctional and ugly ways. I call them diversions. It comes out in obsessions. It comes out in phobias. It comes out in anxiety disorders, eating disorders. Comes out in addictions like gambling, um, drugs, alcohol. Comes out in um, intense anger like road rage. You will heard that. I've seen it. I read in the paper every day. People a fight over a parking spot. It's so intense. They get out of the car. One has a crowbar, the other one has a gun, and things get disastrous. So I know when I read about that, I know now the writers of these pieces, they just focus on what happened. I know that that anger is coming from a deeper place. No anger like that, that's so intense, is a result of somebody taking a parking space from you. So again, that's just another diversion. It's another way these feelings come out. And why I call them diversions, because they're coming out in these all sorts of disorders, but they're keeping you away from the true source of who hurt you, because your focus then is on the obsession, it's on the anger, it's on the eating disorder. So I had to develop when I was seeing the people that started to come to me, I had to develop a way that I felt I wanted to get permanent healing from these people. So, because what I was having some success, I kept getting referrals after referrals on it, but I wasn't satisfied with my results. Other people seemed to be, but I wasn't getting the deep cleansing and the permanent healing that I want, because some of the people were still having some of these diversions. So I said, I was trained in many therapies, many techniques, and I was trying different parts of these things, what worked, what didn't work. And I was able to sequence this. It was trial and error. I was able to sequence that, and I created this three-phase process of really getting to the deep part, getting those feelings out, and then the versions evaporate. So that's the basics of my healing, and that's the basis of source completion therapy. Now, the book I wrote, it goes into that in detail. It's called "Give Back the Pain." And it's three phases. When you want to talk about the phases, I'll be glad to do that. But that's basically the history, my abuse, and how I came to help others. And over the years, I've helped thousands of people permanently heal from their afflictions.
No, I mean, first of all, I must really thank you for um sharing. I mean, people say that it's always it's uncomfortable to share or revisit the most traumatic memories, whether it's from childhood or teenage or whichever phase of your life it is. But especially when it is from childhood, because scientifically, if we see and socially, culturally, um, the first 7 to 10 years of your childhood are the most precious ones. They shape the foundation of you as a person, as a human, your entire life. I mean, even if you do not want to kind of agree, but subconsciously, those years, those early years, they form the basic in there. And
I
I mean,
agree.
yeah, yeah. And um, when if those memories are horrifying, terrifying, I mean, you know, sometimes when people would say that even the worst of my enemies don't have to go through such ordeals, I think revisiting those memories, it needs a lot of courage and vulnerability. And then seeking inspiration and kind of taking that as something uh, to help people out there who have been the sufferers, who have been the victims in there. I'll be very explicit, victims in there, and helping out there. I think I shouldn't say it's put into the best use, but at least, it's constructively put in there. So I really appreciate Robert sharing that very candidly. One question that, really comes to my mind, Robert, is, since you specifically got into psychology, did you try to understand, and it's not compulsory that you have to answer this, but, just out of curiosity, like, why? especially, abusive parents, they behave like this. Is it once again because of something they have gone through in their own childhood or maybe teenage, or I mean, can we make a sense out of it? Like, why is it like show of power or dominance or control? A quick pause for you listening listeners. If this conversation is already giving you language for what you feel inside, or if you feel it's helping you see your patterns with a little less shame, hit follow. All right, back to it.
If it is that, that still comes from because they were hurt. So whatever, like, rationality we wanna give it, it's because
Mhm.
these people were hurt. I mean, for the most part, I would say 98% is because they were hurt. Once in a while, in my decades of work, I've seen people that it's just they must have been born, maybe there's 2% that are born as people tell me, evil, or they're born dysfunctional, they're born their chemistry is their wiring is a little different. But for the most part, 98% of the people that I've dealt with or that I've seen, it's because they were hurt and they don't want to feel, so it comes out in anger. My mother didn't want to feel. She never did, even into when I used my own process to heal because when I was going to private therapy or even therapy that I went to as part of my PhD, it still didn't go deep enough to get all that pain that I had inside out. So I used my therapy as well, and I dealt with my mother, and that helped me. But she was abused terrifically as a child, so I knew where it came from.
Mm. But I don't think that should be the reason to justify the actions, because
Yeah.
sometimes, it's very crazy, it's very weird that, I've seen, especially around, uh, you know, um, serial killers or psycho killers that
Mm.
people, there's some bracket of people who would empathize with their background because they were hurt in their childhood. That is why they're doing those actions. It is not because they're consciously doing those actions. Something is making them to do those actions.
Right. Yes, I there's no excuse for it. That's the way I put
Yeah.
it, and it didn't take away the pain that was inflicted on others. It doesn't do that. Just to know it, to become aware of the reason. But you asked the question, so that they do it because they've been hurt themselves, but it doesn't excuse what they do.
Mm, absolutely. And Robert will definitely get to get into the details around source completion therapy and also your book.
Mm.
But one kind of contradiction, not contradiction, but a bit of a nuance here, like a challenge. Like many people feel that their trauma shaped who they are. I mean, their empathy, their resilience, even their career path. So, if a wound is completed, is there a risk of losing something meaningful along with it? Like, they completely tie their identity with that trauma.
That's a great question, and I think they become something, better. They become something not afflicted with any of their issues. I call those diversions, the alcohol, the gambling, they become, on a better level where they can be open up to life and the beauty of it. So, that's how I see it. It's not losing, it's really gaining. What you're losing is the pain and the
Mm,
misery inside, and you're picking up the beauty of life. So that's how I look at it, and that's how my clients look at it when they're healed. Patients, clients.
exactly. Makes sense. Makes sense. And I think I mean, I at least realize that, healing does not erase our story. I mean, it definitely changes our relationship with it. And the pain no longer drives you, but the wisdom can stay.
Correct. Correct. I always tell the people that work with me that you'll always remember, but what will leave is the intensity of those feelings, and therefore that won't be the fuel for all your diversions and all your symptoms, and that's what happens. Those diversions evaporate, the symptoms go away, and they could do whatever they want in life. Then I worked with a woman. Came to me in I think it was at early 30s. She was by her father. beaten, degraded, chained up to radiators, which give heat. Um, and she came to me. She didn't sleep in a bed for I guess decades, and she didn't take a shower. She would give herself sponge baths, where she would use a sponge. So she was on the bed, and she was in the shower. So she didn't have any of those, and she was non-functioning. She couldn't have relationships. She couldn't work. So she was referred to me, and I know we went back. And I took her back through my process, which I take a person back in time, and eventually, by going through the process, we get her aware how her father did exactly what he did, and then she feels it deeply. And then at the end, she confronts him. Um, that healed her so much that she at the end of the process she was able to take the showers. She got a bed that she slept in. She went on to become a social worker, so she had a productive life as in a career. She met someone who she married, and she had children, and she lived a really fruitful life. She still is doing that. So that's what happens, and it's just very rewarding for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's giving back the pain and taking back the control and power in a good way. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Super. And let's get to the three phases of source completion therapy, Robert. If you can,
Sure.
share those.
Sure. So briefly, let's go through it. The first is awareness. So again, kids repress their emotions. They suppress it. They stuff it down. They numb it off, or whatever word you want to use. It's down in the subconscious. So when they come to me with all the symptoms, I have to get them to see how they were hurt, what happened to them. Bring it up at least cognitively, where they were hurt. So examples, I use dream interpretation, and I'm aware of their body, so I use a body language and dream interpretation, and important open questions. So let me give you an example of the body language that I use. So a woman was describing. She came to me. She was again referred to me by I believe a hospital. She was getting this rash in her body every couple of months, and it was all over her body. They tried salves and creams, they tried pills, they tried shots, and it would still come back. She would still get it, so it wasn't going away. So I got the referral, and I said, "Well, let's do something a little different. Let's look. I want you to look under the skin because that's talking to you. What is under the skin saying to you?" She said, "Well, no one ever asked me that question." So she took a few seconds. She thought about it, and she said to me, "Oh, wow, that's the poison my grandfather put in me when I sat on his lap when I was 6 years old, and he molested me and he touched me. So that poison is just rampant through my body." And then that's the awareness of who hurt her and what happened, and then we go t and then in terms of dream interpretation, I'll go to that quickly. I like to have people interpret their dreams as
Mm,
each thing or person in the dream is a part of themselves. So a person was talking, and they had the dream that in front of them was a big castle, and out of each a hole or orifice in the castle was weapons. There were machine guns, there were spears, there was a bow and arrows, there was cannons, mortars, whatever you can think of was
mm,
sticking out of the castle, and there was a moat with alligators and big dangerous things. So she said, I don't understand that." So I said, "Well, let's look at it as if the castle was you. So what's happening there?" So she said, "Okay, now I get it." She said, "Okay, I'm cautious about everything. I protect myself from being hurt,
mm,
and I don't want anyone close to me." And I said, "Well, who hurt you?" And she said, "It was my father." So we go in there. So dream interpretation and body language, I'm always looking at a person's body as I'm talking to them. I'm listening with my eyes, basically. So I get them to be cognitively aware of who hurt them. Now, in the next phase, uh, I take them back in time. I help them go back in time. Now, this is a process. They have to be safe. They have to be in the mode of trusting me, and that takes some time. I never push them, never push a person. And they have to be really comfortable. And I take them back in time to the events around their abuse or their degradation, however, whatever
mm,
happened. And I have them then while they're back in time. This is through hypnosis, self hypnosis, visualization, and all those three could be used. I have them feel all the feelings, see all the sights, hear all the sounds and smells, and so it's almost as if they have everything, all the uh, sensory, what they have, sensory feelings,
Mm.
they could feel. So that I take them back to that, and that's really what the purpose of that phase is. It brings up all the feelings to the surface that you've been repressed for decades. A lot of these people had decades of repression. It brings it to the surface. So I know I have to go further with that, but not yet. So what I do in that phase, after they know exactly what happened and they went back in time, they process it a little bit more. Some people write about it. I have artists that work with me that paint pictures or draw pictures of what happened to them, how they felt about it. They express themselves through art. I have let's see, anything they can do to create and stay with the feelings
Mm.
is what I do in that phase. I had one person, a sculptor, uh, made sculptures of him in tormented, him tormented. He looked tormented in the sculptures, so that would help him stay with the feelings and more expressive, more emoting of feelings. The third phase now, the feelings are up, they have awareness of who hurt them. In the third phase, this is the most difficult for people to go into. It's the phase where I have them communicate to the person who hurt them or persons, telling them how they felt, what was done, and how it affected them. So that's what they tell they communicate to that person, that how I felt about what you did, what exactly you did to me, and
Mhm.
how it affected me. So, a question so if an asked me, "Well, what happens if the person's dead and, what do you do there?" So I said, "Well, they could write to the person. They could write to them, which is effective. They could, the person that I noted before, whose father raped her in the bed in the shower, she went to his grave because he had passed away by the time I met her, and she talked to him at his grave, and what she did, she took a knife that he used to hold over her throat when he was raping her, and she was stabbing the grounds. I said, "Well, just when you do that, just make sure the authorities aren't around." So, and she did it, and she felt good again. That was her part of her completion. So, that's the phase that's most difficult for people to do because a lot of times, if the people are still alive, they want some kind of a relationship. Maybe it's a father and mother. So they don't wanna make it worse. They don't wanna they lose the relationship. And another reason they don't it's so hard because it brings up all the feelings even deeper and even more intense. So those are the things that make it, difficult for that third phase, but it's really crucial in the completion of the process. Most therapies don't do that. Most therapies, maybe they have one phase, maybe another. None of them have the 3 phases that I know of. And, so that was what I needed to heal, and it's what I use with the people I work with.
Hmm. And Robert, I mean, yes, this is, I believe, it takes different amount of time for different people, but
Yes.
it's also a challenging one. So, um, uh, once again, I mean, it all ties back to this idea that, sometimes there are traumas, there is trauma that, you shouldn't relive because, I mean, it's difficult, and it can be physically, emotionally overwhelming as well.
It can be, yes.
Yeah. So,
If it's not done with in a trusting relationship with me,
mhm,
if it's not, done at the person's pace that they're comfortable with, it could be, harming. But I don't do it that way. They have to feel really
mhm,
safe, and we go based on some wanna do it right away. So
mhm.
they do it right away. They said, "I wanna do this. I wanna get into it." Others could take a long time. So it's always based on the pace of the person and how comfortable they are moving forward.
And all this, Robert, how you keep yourself grounded, because I mean, it can be sometimes, very, like it can take a piece of you when you're actually kind of, becoming a part of that entire lived horrifying experience of others.
Yeah, it is. It can be very draining to me too, but I make sure that I'm what do I have an exercise program. I have a, meditation program that I use.
Yeah.
Um, that was what was so hard. That was a really good question, Sana. What was so hard about writing my book, the difficult, what people ask me, what are the challenges when you wrote the book? So the challenge is these are really true stories of people I wrote. Some are composites because I had to protect the identities of the
Yeah.
people. So I had to go back into their situation. I had to relive what they were going through. So had to feel all that so I could write it. I wrote it in really feeling and with depth. So on each story. So it was very challenging and it was exhausting. And I was crying and each person that I told the story about.
Understood. Understood, Robert. And before we conclude, I want to ask a question that, it can be uncomfortable, but I think it's a very important one. There's decades of experience that you have, success stories. But what about the people for whom this may not work or does not work? Like, is there a risk in presenting any therapeutic approach as, universally effective?
That's a really good question. I only work with the people that understand this process and are willing to do it. They can choose other ways. I mean,
Okay.
sometimes, okay, here's where sometimes they say cognitive behavioral therapy could help. They're using this EMDR now,
Yeah.
and they're using tapping. So let me just quickly, if I may, just
Yes, sir.
tell you something. I had an award-winning singer and actress contact me pretty recently. Um, she was really struggling. She said she saw me on a show and she read my book and she said, "Look, would you see me? I'm I'm really really struggling. I'm on drugs. I've been taking drugs. I'm having toxic relationships. I'm having an out of body experience. I'm terrified, and I've been to a few therapists with therapies, and they just would not use. They weren't helpful, and they made me feel worse. And I saw what you talked about, and I read the book, and he said that makes sense to me. So what the issue was, she says one of the psychiatrists, she said, "Seems like you're schizophrenic with those out of body. I want to give you medication." So that made her feel worse. She said, "I tried EMDR, that didn't do anything, and I felt worse because I felt like a failure. I tried the CBT, not good. I feel and I felt they were annoyed with me almost that I wasn't making any progress. So I'm calling you." Okay, so I said to her, number one, based on everything you say, you're not schizophrenic. You've stored feelings from the past that had hurt you. Somebody has hurt you in your life, and the drugs and alcohol are way and the toxic relationships are the way to numb that hurt and divert away from it. So tell me who hurt you. And then she went into her father, how he really hurt her, and the pain that he caused her. And okay, so just simply the diversions went away. She stopped the toxic relationship. She stopped the drugs. The out of body experiences went away, and she thanks me all the time. I get emails from her that I helped her enormously, and she's grateful. And she continued to flourish then with her career. So that's an example. She was ready to do what I explained. If a person's not, I'm not going to push it on them. So the other therapies just didn't work for her. So
Yeah.
that's an example of that.
I really appreciate that because, healing is possible, but then it is not forced. It requires safety, readiness, and then the right timing as well. Like, it's respectful.
Very much so. I don't force anybody to do anything.
Robert, so of course, before we wrap up, if listeners they would like to connect further with you, get a hold of your book, what would be the easiest medium?
For the book, you could go to Amazon. The book title of the book is called "Give Back the Pain," but you could go to my website. The book is there, and you could just click on the the little button. So you either way. And the website is Robert Bleck, BLECK.com. Simple.
Amazing. Yes, simple. And listeners, I'll have all the links, details attached along with this episode. So just refer to the show notes or the podcast description on whichever platform you're listening to your podcast to. And I think as we come to a close here, let's reflect on something that, has personally stayed with me during this conversation. Like, so many of us, we are walking around believing that our pain is our identity, that our anxiety, anger, or numbness is just who we are. I mean, we equate our identity to all these feelings. But then what today's conversation offers is not certainty, but at least a possibility. The possibility that some pain is not permanent, that some wounds are not meant to be carried forever. So before we end, one final question. If someone listening right now feels a quiet recognition, a sense that something in them remains unfinished, Robert, any gentle first step that they can take toward healing, just one baby step that they can start with.
I would always say find out where the source of your pain. That's the first step. And that's all you have to do to start the process.
Awareness. And to all the listeners, you heard Robert, and if this conversation resonated, take your time, sit with what came up. You do not have to rush toward answers. Healing, as we heard today, is not about fixing yourself. It is about giving back pain that was never ever yours to carry. Until next time, this has been The Mindful Living. I'm your host, Sana and Robert. Thank you so, so much for your honesty, your courage, and for sharing both your personal and professional journey with us.
And thank you for being such a wonderful host. It was my honor to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Robert. And listeners, until next time, take care of yourselves, and I'll catch you in the next episode of The Mindful Living. Thank you, and take care.